February 1941. World War II is in full swing and Nazi Germany seems unstoppable. Half of Europe has fallen before the Axis war machine. Italy, however, isn't sharing in the successes of their ally Germany. 7 months prior, in the summer of 1940, they had declared war on Britain and embarked on an invasion of British Egypt through their own African colony, Libya. Despite outnumbering the British forces, the invasion was an embarrassing failure, and the Italians were driven deep back into Libya by the British Eighth Army. Now, the entire colony is at risk. If Libya is lost, the situation in the Mediterranean will change. Germany realizes this and sends a detachment under General Erwin Rommel to save Libya. Nicknamed the Desert Fox, Rommel was a truly brilliant commander. He would serve in both world wars until his execution in 1944 due to his suspected involvement in a plot to assassinate Hitler. He commanded troops in many theaters like Poland and France, but it was his campaign in North Africa that distinguished him as one of the greatest generals of the war. Rommel commands the remaining battalion troops in the Africa Corps, consisting of the 21st and the 15th Panzer Division. Panzer is the word for tank in German. Initially, his orders are to hold the line at Al-Khaila and prevent Libya from falling into British hands. Rommel disobeys and launches an offensive within months of his arrival. In a military miracle, all of the territory that had been lost by Italy in 1940 is recaptured despite the orders of German and Italian high command and the professional military advice he was given. Now August, both German and British forces undergo reorganization. The British replace their old commander with a new one, Sir Claude Auchinleck. The German High Command promotes Rommel to head of Panzer Army Africa, encompassing the Africa Corps and the Italian units, as well as the newly arrived 90th Light Division. It is here, however, that Rommel first faces a problem that will plague him throughout the campaign: petrol. Since there is no local supply, all of it has to be shipped across the Mediterranean, where it is often intercepted. Auchinleck, under pressure from his superiors to get something done, launches an offensive. He is successful, and by the end of 1942, he has pushed Rommel right back where he started the last year in Al-Khaila. But Rommel, not to be outdone, repeats almost the exact operation he had embarked upon the previous year. The results are nearly the same as well, and by June, Panzer Army Africa is crossing the frontier into Egypt. A victory at Mersa Matruh forces the British to fall back yet again, with Rommel in pursuit. Finally, he is halted at El Alamein. Field Marshal Lord Carver, in his book El Alamein, comments on the following period. Throughout July, fighting continued up and down the El Alamein line. It was like a boxing bout in reverse. At the start, both sides were weak and utterly exhausted. They flailed away but did little damage to each other. As time went on, however, they gathered strength and each thought he was in a position to deal a knockout blow. But each time one struck, he found the other stronger too, especially in his defense. El Alamein is a small rail station on the coast 50 miles from Alexandria. To the south of it is the Qattara Depression, impassable by vehicles. To the north of El Alamein is the Mediterranean. Therefore, any army wishing to invade Egypt from the west must funnel through a 28-mile-wide stretch. Despite the advantage given them by the terrain, morale is at a low in the once confident British Eighth Army. Since the middle of 1941, they have had a numerical and a material superiority over the enemy, yet they have been pushed back deep into Egypt. Rommel, on the other hand, now has his eyes on Cairo and past that to the Suez Canal. If he can win a victory here, all of Egypt opens up to him. Rommel has under his command 4 corps with which to break through the British line at El Alamein. The Italian 21st Corps hold the northern sector, while the south was the responsibility of the Italian 10th Corps. In reserve behind are 2 mobile corps. the Italian 20th Corps with Littorio, Trieste, and Ariete divisions, and the German Africa Corps. The only thing that stood in their way was the 8th Army and their new commander, General Bernard Montgomery. Montgomery, like Rommel, fought in both world wars and enjoyed tremendous loyalty from his troops. His army had two corps, the 13th and the 30th. Montgomery assumes correctly that the most likely method of attack was a sweep through the south, then northeast towards the coast to cut off the 30th Corps. He decides to base his defense around Bear Ridge in order to prevent Rommel's tanks from encircling the army, while also holding a small mobile reserve to strike Rommel on the flank. On August 31st, 1942, Rommel begins his attack, moving the Africa Corps and the Italian 20th Corps east, through the British minefields in the south. Heavy resistance, along with British air superiority and incessant artillery, significantly slows their progress, but the Africa Corps still managed to break through and, as expected, engage with the main defense at Bear Ridge. Both the 15th and the 21st Panzer Divisions make attacks, but both are driven off. Finding that his forces can make no headway and facing constant air battles, Rommel calls off the attack, attributing the failure to a lack of petrol. His army is exhausted and worn down. At this point, his dreams of taking Egypt and the Suez have slipped away, and now his only option is to dig in and let Montgomery attack. Having successfully defended at Alam el Halfa, Montgomery begins the long and difficult preparation required to make an attack against the Panzer Army Africa. He starts by creating a new corps, the 10th. The 10th is to be the mobile corps with tank divisions. He also begins moving units out of the front line to train and rest, as well as organizing efforts to deceive the Germans of where and when the attack would come. His plan is to have the infantry of the 30th Corps attack through the German minefields in the north, clearing a way for the 10th's tanks to pass through. 30th Corps would then systematically destroy the German and Italian infantry in a crumbling operation. Rommel couldn't afford to let his infantry be worn away, and would commit his tanks to save them. He would be forced to attack 10th Corps, who would destroy Rommel's tank, or at least prevent them from interfering with the crumbling. The 13th Corps in the south will make a secondary attack to see if they can break through the enemy lines, but they were primarily a diversion. While these preparations are being made, Rommel is sent back to Germany due to a sickness. His temporary replacement is General Strum, who cannot hope to match the Desert Fox in the eyes of his soldiers. So on the 9th of October 23rd, when the British begin their attack, the Panzer Army Africa was missing their commander, who had led them to this point against all odds. The attack opens with a large artillery program, behind which are the infantry of the 4 divisions in the 30th Corps, who will push past the Army's main defense lines and clear gaps in the minefields. The 9th Australian, the northernmost division, faces weak opposition and reaches its objective. Beneath them is the Highlands 51st Division, whose final objective is larger and includes many of the strongest parts of the enemy defense. They fight hard and take many casualties, but don't penetrate the Germans' main defense line, and cause several problems, resulting in delays for the 1st Armored Division following behind them. South of the Highland Division is the 2nd New Zealand Division, whose objective is just beyond Mataria Bridge. Almost the entire division reaches their objective, but the 10th Armored, who is supposed to pass through, is nowhere to be seen, so they dig in. The furthest south is the 1st South African Division. Like the New Zealanders, they're all on their objective by dawn, except on their right flank. By daylight the next morning, neither 10th Corps in the north nor 13th Corps in the south have broken through, disappointing Montgomery. His orders for October 24th are an attack that night southwestward from Materia Ridge by the New Zealand Division and the 10th Armored Division. At the same time, Sturm, visiting the front lines to get a clear picture of the battle, suffers a fatal heart attack. At a crucial point in the battle, the Panzer Army Africa has lost their replacement commander. The British attack during the night fails nonetheless, making very little progress. After much thought, Montgomery decides to abandon his plans and launch an attack near Kidney Ridge with the Australian 9th Division, part of a larger attempt to cut off Axis units near the coast. Although it succeeds, the Germans aren't surrounded yet. Action by the 51st Highland and the 1st Armored Division continue as well. This is mostly unsuccessful. Around this time, Rommel arrives back in Africa. The situation is grim upon his return. Since the battle has begun, intense and constant air attacks and artillery have caused major damage and lowered morale. Lack of petrol prevented major movement, and what limited counterattacks were possible had only resulted in greatly diminishing the 15th Panzer Division. After assessing the situation, Rommel makes counterattacks against the Australians, achieving mixed success. He also decides to bring up the 21st Panzer Division from the south. The British, meanwhile, make attacks to break out by Kidney Ridge, none of which succeed, but do encourage Rommel to move the 90th Light Division into the front lines. Despite the difficult situation he has put his enemy in, Montgomery is concerned that his offensive is losing momentum. He decides to move some of the units out of the front line to create a reserve, as well as end the costly attacks in the south. Fighting near Kidney Ridge continue on the 27th, but no breakthrough is achieved. Montgomery again changes his plans, making the Kidney Ridge area a defensive front while shifting his focus to the Australians, who are to launch a second attack that night. Rommel, realizing the decisive moment in the battle has come, moves almost all the remaining German units up from the south. The Australian division makes their thrust that night, but once again they are thrown back. Rommel still knows, though, that his army is on its last legs, and goes back and forth over whether or not to withdraw. Not retreating and waiting for the final breakthrough could mean disaster, but retreating now would mean abandoning his immobile infantry. He therefore decides to make one more attempt at a stubborn defense to persuade the British to call off the attack, a choice influenced by his precarious fuel situation. The night of the 30th, the Australians carry out an assault that finally captured the coast road and, more importantly, draw the 21st Panzer Division away from a new operation being planned. As the attack by the Australians is going on, Montgomery is formulating a plan, Operation Supercharge. On the morning of November 2nd, the New Zealand Division will strike west, aiming to reach just east of the Raman track. 10th Corps will follow behind, and then cut toward Tel al-Akir, where Montgomery hopes to fight a final decisive tank battle, destroying all of the enemy armor. Finally, they will move northwest to cut off Rommel's troops on the coast. The New Zealand Division begins their attack early in the day and push to their objective, taking heavy losses. 10th Corps yet again faces opposition to the west, preventing a breakout, but do destroy a great number of enemy tanks. The southern flank is the most promising, as the army seems to be much weaker there. So Montgomery decides to take advantage. The 51st Division and the 4th Indian Division attack and break through the German and Italian lines here, while tank battles between the Africa Corps and 10th Corps rage on the Raman track. Rommel, knowing his army is exhausted and beaten, makes the decision to retreat. He details his feeling in a letter to his wife. "Dearest Lou, The battle is going very heavily against us. We're simply being crushed by the enemy weight. I've made an attempt to salvage part of the army. I wonder if it will succeed. At night, I lie open-eyed, racking my brain for a way out of this plight for my poor troops. We are facing very difficult days, perhaps the most difficult that a man can undergo. The dead are lucky. It's all over for them. I think of you constantly with heartfelt love and gratitude. Perhaps all will be well, and we shall see each other again. The 21st Italian Infantry Corps, along with the 90th Light Division, will hold the line, while the Africa Corps and the Italian 20th Corps retreat. All three divisions of the Italian 20th are destroyed, however, before they can get away. Rommel's original intentions are to hold at Fuca for as long as he can, giving his infantry time to get back. The British threatened to outflank him, though, forcing him to withdraw further to Mersa Matruh, a move that means abandoning most of the Italian infantry. Because of this, the only forces that Rommel has left were the 90th Light Division and the Africa Corps. Montgomery gives chase to the remnants of the Panzer Army Africa, but confusion between the three corps causes them to be slow in their pursuit. Because of this, they fail to cut off and fully destroy Rommel's army at Fuca or Mersa Matruh. Although Rommel would continue to fight in North Africa until May of 1943, make no mistake, the Allied victory at El Alamein was resounding and complete. The battle can clearly be seen as the turning point of the entire war. Shortly after its conclusion, American, British, and French troops would make landings on the North African coast to the east of Libya in Operation Torch. They would push back the Germans in a two-front war in Tunisia, eventually chasing the Axis entirely out of North Africa. Only a month after Alamein, the Battle of Stalingrad ended with a huge German defeat. It is interesting to think that only a few months before the battle, Rommel had grand ambitions of capturing the Suez Canal and even going past into the oil fields of Persia and the Caucasus. Alamein is also notable because it stands in stark contrast to other battles in North Africa. It was a battle of attrition, with great artillery barrages and a direct approach, resembling those fought during World War I. Rommel had sought an alternative to these types of battles, as had many generals, due to the tremendous carnage and death caused by them. He used mobile battles and an indirect approach throughout his career, and one would be hard-pressed to find someone better at it. But Montgomery had, however expensive and unromantic it may have been, scored a great victory that, along with Stalingrad, marked the definitive turning point in the Second World War.